Welcome back to Peterson Auto. We're working on the Mustang again, doing the second half of the Sn95 swap, which is the rear end. Right now, you can see the front end's done. Looks a lot better. Sitting a little high because they actually have the rear end jacked up already. But yeah, so we're going to be doing the rear. That's the next step. Alright, so we got both wheels off. The rear end can be harder, it can be easier, depends how you look at it. The big heavy axle to move in there, that's probably the harder part. Easier part is there's less technicalities to it. So the best way I can say it is it's really a trade-off right now. So, shocks look in good shape, they're staying. Those OEM rear springs are looking pretty good. We might even keep those, I don't know. A little bit of corrosion, but nothing bad. I'll probably hit that with some undercoating. Most of it looks like it'll like wash off type of corrosion, so like just salt spray type stuff. Other than that, simple process is go ahead and we're going to get the shocks removed to start with. We're going to get the drive shaft bolts out. They're 12.12 mil typically. They are kind of hard to acquire that sometimes, so just something to consider. However, shouldn't be too much of a problem for you. The upper control arms are going to stay, so I'm going to disconnect them from the axle. Lower control arms are getting replaced, so I'm going to disconnect them from the chassis of the car. And we have the brake hose to deal with at the very last minute, hopefully. We'll have to see how exactly that one goes. It might have a little rust on it in there like the front ones did. But yeah, it's a fairly simple process actually, believe it or not. There ain't much to it. And it's just disconnect and reconnect, so we're going to get started here. And we also have e-brake cables to worry about and a proportioning valve. So the e-brake cables are different. We're using 93 Cobra e-brake cables because we're using the Sn95 rear disc brakes on this. So these would need disconnected up wherever that routes to right now, I don't remember offhand. But wherever the cable routes to, we'll need to disconnect that, reroute them down through and everything. So there's your 12.12 mil drive shaft bolts. They're usually easiest to get from the bottom of where the drive shaft goes. So yeah, just something to remember and consider when you go ahead and do this. And I just used the pry bar from the back side to pop that off. Usually you can give them a couple whacks and they'll pop right off. Alright, now the drive shaft's out, we're going to move on to the upper control arms.
Sorry YouTube, forgot a little bit there. Disconnected the other side and got the brake line disconnected. I put a pair of vice grips on the hose and disconnected the lines so we can reuse the hose. Not ideal to put vice grips on them and reuse them, but is what it is for today. The one I had wasn't right, so I'll order a new one, then eventually get a new one on. So here comes the rear. There we go, one 7.5 rear axle out of the car. Okay. One control arm, and we're going to do the same on the other side for the other one, get that out. But I won't bore you with watching me from across the car doing the same thing again. We'll however give you a view here. Shocks, brake hose, upper control arms are back in there. Lowers go back into these holes, which are called the torque boxes, lower torque box and upper torque box. So, exhaust is horrible on this thing. Another control arm's a little bit on the rusty side, but it'll be fine. I like to keep the stock upper control arms because they have rubber bushings in them, and this suspension, you see how these go inward and then these are parallel to each other, so the suspension inherently binds, and if you do all solid bushings, you're going to probably wind up having an issue or two with that. So that's why I like to keep the stock uppers. Should have a little better shaped set of stock uppers, but it's not worth taking them out right now. And I'm going to hit some spots up in here with a little more undercoating, which as you can see I did already. You know, I cleaned up some of the light corrosion on these pieces, and I'm going to hit with some more undercoating then see where that goes. So I'm going to do all that, and I'll be back when I'm ready to put the new axle in. Well, YouTube, we're now rolling the rear in. Lucky you can roll it under. I don't know if I'm going to get that lucky. Nope. Not sure how good of a shot we're getting from here, but we're under the car and attempting to line up these last 2 control arm bolts. The bolts for the lower arms in, but no nuts on them. And the uppers, no nuts or bolts. You gotta find the balance point on the center of the diff. I think I was just a hair off. Alright YouTube, there's the uppers in. I think we're going to put the brake hose in now and see what I can do with that. So the brake hose is retained by the breather. It's going to sit right, which is right here. The other side set up right, so we'll have to see. But you know what? I'm actually going to use this one because it's a lot cleaner as far as the inside goes. So there's less gunk and stuff built up. It's going to cause an issue. Whenever you are in here, check your breather, make sure it's good though. A lot of the time they're not. Another thing I've seen is the shock bolts are slightly different. Last one I did was the exact same swap. Same donor car and everything. So we'll need to get the new shock bolts here. We can get all the control arms tightened up and we're going to put the drive shaft back in then. Alright, so axle's in. One thing I forgot was the springs. So when you put your lower arms in, get the bolts in and everything for them, put your springs in place, and then put your upper arms in. Yeah, so I kind of forgot that. So, oops, sorry. But yeah, don't forget your springs. You kind of need them. You got to mess around with that brake line a little bit in there to get it lined up and everything. Not even sure it's the right size. It feels right, but yeah, we'll have to deal with that. But this bracket's for the quad chuck. It would go back here on factory V8 cars. It controls axle wrap. With the 4-cylinder, I'm not concerned about axle wrap. When I do upgrade to a V8, there may be a concern there. At that point, then we'll address said concern. but there's probably going to be a torque arm going on this anyway at one point in time, so, you know. I don't know if you can see my wheel bearing there. It looks like it might be a little leaky. I'm going to run it as is for now, just to get the whole swap done. And then we may replace the seal on the wheel bearing there. So, that being said, we're putting stuff back together today. I still need to run out to get the bolts for these shocks. I'm just going to get a bolt and sleeve that's going to work. If you do want to go to your donor card, get the GT shock bolt there, you know, and pull the GT shocks just to be safe, because there's no metal sleeve in this bushing on the 4-cylinder. The bolt is a shoulder bolt. If you remember, the original shocks mounted in that location, or that orientation. So now we have to turn them. Little things like that, though, they're easy to take care of. You know, I'm just gonna get a metal sleeve, cut it down, put the bolt through it. No big deal. I'll find that at the local steel supply store. And I gotta go grab some parts to put the brakes on, so I'll be back. Okay, so there's be a couple weird things going on here. The caliper has this bracket here, so that tightens down with this U-bolt. U-bolt goes over the axle. So I'm going to pull this off. Remove the U-bolt. And that's like a support plate more than anything for the bracket that bolts to the axle. I've seen people run them without, but personally I don't think I want to risk that. So our bolt goes through our back bracket. Keep your hose out of the way. And yes, I know that hose bracket's still loose there. It's maybe going to get in my way, actually. Shouldn't. Nope. Okay. And you can start by assembling things like this. So now you got an idea how it goes. Get a rotor out. Straighten this dust shield out some. Brand new rotors. Go on. Take one of your lug nuts, put them on backwards. Alright, there we go. And then we can put a caliper bracket in. Next thing is the caliper and the parking brake cable. Now they're a bit of an ordeal with the parking brake cables. You gotta change them out. And these are set up a little weird. Not too weird, but just a little bit. Just enough to be worthy of mention. So here's your cable. Now, it's a 93 Cobra cable. They fit. This part goes up front. So that can go up front. Everything's held in by clamps other than, let's get you a better view. Right here, this you have to feed it through. Then once you get it through, going up underneath. This is the other end. Goes in through this hole, and the cable, if you're smart, you put a bunch of extra cable out. Push the cable over the bracket, and then in through that hole. I'll have to get an E-clip or something to retain that there. There's one from the factory, but I do not have one at this time. So, yeah, that being said. But after you put your E-clip on there, your parking brake cable will work fine. You just route it back up through the factory routing that you can use your 93 cables as a reference for. Pull all the clips and put them back in, and then connect it up on the up in the transmission tunnel right above the drive shaft. Real kind of crappy location, to be honest with you, but you know, it works. So it actually does work really well. So that being said, a lot of the time I'll leave these calipers off until I get that on, which is probably what I'm going to do here. Other than that, as far as wrapping it up, you have your parking brake cables, you have your brakes, you know how to put the pad and the caliper on, you know. If you look, there's a little flat notch here. So the flat notch on the slides, wow, okay, those might need a little work too. The flat notch on the slides needs to face the flat notch on the caliper, right there. So, other than that, they're really easy. It's standard parking brake rear caliper. I'm going to have to turn this in with one of those little ratcheting rotate turn tools. You know, so that being said, we'll get that on then. And I'll get that turned down, but I just wanted to show you how the parking brake cable works on these, because that's slightly different than your factory setup. Other than that, we got to do the proportioning valve. So you already know how to put brakes together. We're not going to do too much to cover any excess on that, because I got some cleanup here to do on these hoses. Hopefully make them usable, because I didn't order them, which I should have, so order them. But yeah, hopefully I can make them usable. And we'll get back here in a little bit once I get some things wrapped up, like this inside brake line, the brakes on the other side. I'm going to get those parking brake cables routed. Got to tighten down the drive shaft bolts too, and put in the proportioner valve, and then bleed the brakes, and we'll be done. So not much left here, YouTube, just some tedious stuff. So we'll get the proportioner valve video in a minute here after I wrap all this up.